Hello and welcome to today's presentation. As you can see on the screen, your company's success isn't measured in megabytes, it's measured in impact. And I'd really like to thank Solution Monday for inviting me to present at the Data Team Summit today. Really fantastic to be here. And let's just get straight into it. So, quick thing about me. Who am I? As you can see there, I am Samir on the screen. My corporate career spanned over about 17, 18 years, worked for a number of large enterprises. I fell into data in about 2002. I took over a 50-person team and started to work on data insights. At that time, the technology wasn't great, but we were still using black and green screens. But throughout the rest of my career, I've been working on the management consulting side and also as an in-house consultant, as well as a data leader, building data teams in the stack, so data management, data analysis, and then data scientists. And then in 2014, I created Datazuum, which is a boutique consultancy. And we specialize in data strategy and operating models. So we work with our clients across the globe to help them create their data strategies and deliver those through the operating model, because that's what I say is the operating model is what makes your strategy real. We work across a number of different clients in not-for-profits, in financial services, in the private sector, and in the government sector. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but in 2014, I also devised something called the Data Strategy Canvas. If you've heard of it, that's great. If not, it really is a way for you to build better data products, work with your customers using incredible language that you can all be aligned on. And equally, what's important, probably the most important thing, is that you are hanging this data strategy canvas off the business strategy. Just a fun fact here, I also in my spare time am a charity auctioneer. I take part and raise money for a number of charities around the world. And to date, I've raised about £10 million for charities. And this particular one, if you can see that there, I was selling the largest white Tuscan truffle in the world, and I sold that in 2007 for $330,000. It was all for charity, 10 children's charities, so it was amazing. And there's me, I live in London. Okay, right, so let's get on to the next slide, which is some of our clients. And as you can see, I've mentioned public sector, private sector, financial services, and not-for-profit. So what I'd like to talk today about is really how a lot of data teams work in the context of data itself and driving actions and decisions. And one of the biggest challenges that I see with a number of data teams is this. They operate on a data level. So, and it's obviously in the name, right? We're, data teams and working in data and on data. But what essentially happens is when organizations create data teams and have this view of what do we need to get done, most start with the data first. And it's a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack, or another adage is boiling the ocean. So because you're trying to find something in that data to provide some information, to respond to some business questions, to gain some insights, to take some decisions, and then take action, to make decisions and take action. Now, what we need to think about is post the pandemic, we are in a completely different world. We're in a completely different landscape. Business is what we call VUCA. We're living in a volatile, unconventional, complex world. Things are changing rapidly, as we've seen in the last year, the advent of Gen AI. People are jumping onto AI, immensely. But what we need to come back to is really thinking about value and being value driven instead of being data driven. So we talk a lot about data driven, and there's a massive dialogue out there on LinkedIn and other places where people are saying that, why are companies not data driven? In some of the research that Randy Bean and his company have done in Wavestone, we're finding that year on year, I think it's into its 12th year, we've seen that being data driven is very difficult, and increasingly, what are the biggest impediments for companies to get to that point? Well, it's around culture, change management, processes. So I think if we switch the narrative from a data-driven to a value-driven, well, then we're kind of latching onto the business strategy itself. And in data strategy, that's what we've got to do. We've got to think about how do we drive value, which is this part of the pyramid here. So essentially, instead of working from the data up, all I'm doing is spinning this particular pyramid on its head. But I'm starting with value, and value is always driven by the business strategy. And why is that? Because the business strategy is where we're heading for the next 5, 10 years, even longer. We know what the objectives are, and those objectives are going to be linked to revenue, customer experience, cost optimization, compliance in terms of regulatory. And therefore, we know what value looks like. And for example, an objective might well be cascaded by the CEO to the rest of the company to say, we need to increase our customer acquisition by 10% in the next 2 years. So by 2026, for example. So that's a very specific objective. And so if we have an objective like that, first, what we need to do is try and work out what are the actions we need to take to get there. Based on that, what are the decisions that we need to make in order to take those actions? What are the insights that we need? And what are the business questions that we're asking of that particular strategic objective? So if it's increasing customer acquisition, you might be asking, well, who are our best performing customers? In which regions are they? What kind of products do they buy? How long have they been a customer for us? And so you start to build up a set of business questions that will allow you to get your insights. And then if you believe that, a specific product is doing really well, then you might say that one of the decisions is we invest more in that product, and we try and work out, what kind of similar customers in another region that is similar to where you are might buy the product. Different ways to do it. You could use predictive tools and so on. And then you take the action, which is, starting to take different marketing campaigns, starting to drive conversion and so on. And so we've got, the business questions, and we know we've got some information in systems. That's going to be which systems are of record of where, what we can use to answer those business questions. And therefore, what we're doing is now we're pinpointing exactly what data we need, because I know we need customer data. We might need transaction data. We might need product data. So we're being more targeted at specific systems and specific attributes of that data. So you see, if we start collectively with a business strategy and hinged on value, because that is what we're trying to become, this value-driven data team that's actually going to be driving out revenue or cost or customer experience, we're really thinking about actions and decisions. So instead of talking to your internal stakeholders and saying, well, what kind of data do you want? Switch it and say, what kind of value do you need to drive? And what are your objectives? And therefore, if I can help you with those objectives to drive that revenue, what would it look like? So that's the essence of what I've seen over my career from about, specifically from when I created Datazuum in 2014. And with the number of clients that we've worked with, every data team falls into this trap. And then we have awkward conversations when we deliver the wrong product, or it's just not usable. So instead, try and work from a value perspective where you can start to really build up to where that data is. And then you have a better chance of building the right product that responds to those business questions, that provides the insights to make those decisions and take those actions. So how would you do that in the scenario that that I've talked about today? Well, look, I also devised something called the Data Strategy Canvas, which I talked about at the beginning of my About Me presentation. And the canvas itself has been put together, and this is about the 24th iteration of the canvas itself. So it's changing all the time because a lot of feedback from customers and clients when they're using it, how are they using it, and therefore that feedback is great because then I can absolutely start to drive out different ways to build out value for organizations. So the idea is that, this is an example. We've got Acme Limited, a company that everybody knows about. But, we've got the strategic objective here. And the strategic objective here is, again, as I say, make it a specific goal. So this is exactly something that you could use. You could sit down with your internal stakeholders, face off with them and say, hey, listen, let's work around a strategic objective. Let's not work around data itself or technology, because those two things are pure enablers. Let's work around what matters for you, and let's find out what that particular strategic objective is and how we can start to build out and test our hypotheses around what you really need. So there's two parts of this particular canvas. One is what I call above the line, which is that's above the line and that's below the line. And obviously you can see this purple line here, which is how I separate the two. Above the line really is about engaging with your business stakeholders, really understanding their specific needs and talking to them in their language, which is an important aspect of what you need to do as a data team to be driving better, more fruitful conversations with your stakeholders. So the first things that I mentioned, and we're going to go left to right, is the key business questions. And key business questions really are thinking about the usual areas that we've seen in the graph, where we go from the descriptive right through to the prescriptive questions. So there's two types of key business questions: key performance questions and key analytic questions. And performance questions are things that are descriptive and diagnostic. So that could be something that was, what happened yesterday or what's happening today. Now, key analytic questions looks at predictive, prescriptive, or decision automation. So these are the things that we cast out into the future. What might happen and what actions do we need to take? And therefore, as you're starting to review that specific strategic objective, you're starting to build, relative to what you're working with your stakeholders, a list of questions that will respond to that strategic objective. Now, the key here is sometimes to say to your stakeholders, let's ask some questions that we never really ask of our business. Because 9 times out of 10, if you ask business stakeholders to list questions, they will probably ask the same questions that they do on a daily basis. So ask them to think about things that they haven't thought about their business. And that really actually gives this a lot more richness when you start to work through the actual canvas itself. And you can blow this up onto a big big piece of paper and put it on the wall, and you can work with this in terms of notepads and post-its and so on. So the next area that we have to look at is over here, which is decisions. Now this is really key, because in terms of decisions, most of the business works around decision making. They have to make decisions in order to drive out particular sets of actions, which then create some kind of new product, or it goes to market with a new product, or a service, or it's about customer experience. But these decisions are really around, if we're going to answer these business questions, what decisions are we going to make off the back of it in order to support those questions to drive that strategic objective? Now, this could be decide on which customers to target if we're looking at this particular strategic objective. It could be decide on which regions we want to target for that customer acquisition. It could be which products would we like to offer to those specific customers. So you need to set out a number of decision points, because that way you're actually then merging the way that the business works in their decision-making process and responding to those business questions. And that helps them. I'll give you an example. There was a CFO that I worked with, and we did this with his team and a number of other enterprise teams. But we did it with their team initially because they were the ones that were the priority. And once we had done this, he actually laminated quite I think it was a sort of it was a flip chart size. He laminated a flip chart size, and he put it on the wall of his where his team could see it, because he wanted to remind them of the specific decisions that they were always making on a daily basis based on these specific drivers. Now that was we did that for about 6 to 8 months. Things did change, so we updated it after that because there were different pressures on that particular business, and there were different competitive views that they needed to look at. But within that 6 to 8 months, they were continuously trying to strive towards that strategic objective, trying to hit that and make sure that they were making the right decisions. So I think it's key to list those decisions, because we don't want people to second guess what they are. The next thing is the actions. So, this could be actions that we need to take across that marketing campaign, for example, in order to drive out, in order to respond to those decisions and those business questions to deliver on the particular strategic objective. So that could be, again, what kind of marketing campaign are we going to do? And you need to act on that, because you're actually taking the action to build a marketing campaign in order to then say, right, this is how we're going to be actioning this campaign and delivering it over a period of time. So that really wraps up what you would do with the business. So those 3 areas are all about a business motivated view. And then what you're trying to do is, again, it's quite logical. Where you've got those business questions, you want to understand, for those business questions, again, if it's hinged on customer, product, transactional, maybe it could be external types of data, because you might want to understand weather patterns or crime stats or educational factors, depending on what kind of industry you're in. And so you might be thinking about different kinds of data that you need, and therefore you might want to know what systems they reside in. But typically you're going to get systems internally, and you're going to be listing them. Are they CRM? Are they ERP? Are they other kinds of accounting systems? You just want to understand, marketing automation systems, etc. You just want to understand where that data possibly is. And then what you want to do is you want to start to map out your first, second, and third-party data needs. And this is really key and essential, because what you want to do is you want to match that to your particular business questions, so that you can start to build out a grid. If we're answering these business questions, then we need these types of data. And actually, some of that data, if we are working in a supply chain business, if we're working in logistics, we might have data coming from second parties. So that could be suppliers, distributors, different channels, different partners. So I categorize this as first, second, third party data. First is obviously the data that you generate, the data that's within your organization. Second party data is the data that's with your suppliers or your partners or your distributors. And third party data is where you're thinking about external types of data. Maybe that's government data, as I mentioned, weather data, could be traffic data. It could be any types of data that you really think about. If you're an actuary, you'll be thinking about, if you're working with actuaries, obviously, and a data scientist, you might be thinking about heavy kind of flooding data or, weather data on that side, in order to, drive the algorithms and quantify that risk. Once you've done that, and if you have the data, because that's the really important thing about the data needs, you really want to make sure that you've got the data internally. If you don't have the data, then maybe you won't be able to respond to specific business questions. So you need to think about that. And therefore, you might need to understand, is that data going to be created soon in a new system? Or again, is it something that we can get from externally? So this is when, once we've done this, the data needs, then we can start to prioritize, and you can, know what your first, second, third, fourth, fifth priorities are. You now know what your data needs are, you can start to understand what sort of data you have or you don't have. And this is also good, again, you can go off and do some data profiling. You know your data internally as people working in data teams, so you know exactly what's available. If you're doing this for the first time and you're doing it in a greenfield site, obviously it might be quite difficult, but go off and do some data discovery and find out what data there is, what quality that data's, what structure it is, and essentially understand whether you can respond to the specific questions in tow. So now you've set priorities. Now what you really need to do is go above the line, because this is really important. You need to understand, if you're building a product out, for example, if it's a predictive model, or if it's something that, a specific, if it's a dashboard, or if it's data going into an app, who are the consumers? Who's going to be consuming this as a specific internal consumer or an external consumer? You might be building an application for an external consumer. What is the kind of data product you're delivering? The data product could be a schema, it could be a data set, it could be a data model, it could be a dashboard, it could be an end algorithm, so what is that data product that you're going to be building? And again, it's based on those two types of questions: key performance questions, which lends itself more to a sort of dashboarding view, or data being pushed and embedded into an application, or a key analytic question, which then thinks about more algorithmic kind of product. So, think about those two. What are the business processes that you might need to work in? Because, if you're pushing data into a system for a decision to be made, are there underlying business processes that you need to think about? Or if you're doing it for a marketing campaign, what are those business processes that you need to understand and then underpin? And essentially, what are the success measures? How will you know when you've succeeded in implementing those business questions, decisions, and actions? So you've got to come up with some success measures that will help you understand exactly how you're going to be success-wise. Internal impacts: you might have, a lack of skills in order to build some of the product that you think about. If you don't have the analytical skills, you might have a change problem. You might have a lack of capabilities internally to deliver some of these areas. So you need to know, are there internal impacts? And then external impacts, really about, what factors do I need to take into consideration, such as, are there political, economic, competitive, or regulatory factors, markets, social factors? These are really important, because if you're building something that's going to go out and you're going to start targeting people in specific areas in your marketing campaign, well, is there anything, in it from a privacy perspective that you need to be concerned about? Or are there competitive natures in that region that, are going to be more interesting, and you're going to have to be very different in the way that you communicate to those people in your marketing campaign? So really think about those external impacts. There could be new regulation coming that's going to impact the work that you're doing. So really understand that. But as you start to build this, it will help you, one, articulate your needs much better with the business. You'll work in the business language, which is the context that the business needs it to be in. You'll be looking at a value-based view. So you'll be quantifying that, and you can take this and quantify the value as well, because you can start to understand, if we do this and we start to answer these questions, what's the return on investment that we might get if we're going to, start to pitch these people in a new area? Can we forecast what we might get in terms of new acquisition and so on? So that also lends to your business case. So I hope today that you've had a really, really good view into understanding decision making from a data perspective, but looking at it through a value lens, really looking at it from value, and turning that pyramid upside down to come at it from the strategic perspective, and then being able to build better products for your consumers internally, and delivering value and driving the bottom line. And I really am glad that you've turned up today and had a chance, and I've had a chance to speak to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for attending today. There's my details, QR code for LinkedIn, so you can always grab me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. But thank you very much, and thank you once again to Solution Monday. It's been a great event today at Data Team Summit. Thank you.